Hi, I'm Heather Jane Gray, Chief Exec of Synergy Global. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're from. We've had a wonderful time so far, and we're thrilled to say that we've got over 3,000 registrations for this week from across the world. So it's great to have such an international crew with us, which we're all enjoying very much. On behalf of Synergy Global's team and our wonderful partner, Natalie and the Open Door Coaching Group, we'd like to welcome you to this keynote session with Charlotte Tharup. And I'll just go to our acknowledgement slide, please, Charlotte. And we'll just start with acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and communities of Australia. We pay our respects to them and to their elders, past, present and emerging. Thank you, Charlotte. We just go to the title slide now. And so this is Finding Calm in the Midst of Chaos, how to deal with COVID-19 and other world and personal anxieties. So it is a great pleasure to introduce Charlotte. I'll have the introduction slide, please. And Charlotte is an ICF ACC. She's actually our Synergy Global team leader in mindfulness and incredibly well qualified in that area. She has trained psychologists, businesses, individuals from all walks of life, and is qualified in mediation and counselling with a BA in adult education. Charlotte's Mindfulness at Work and Mindful Leadership programs were some of the first of their kind in Australia, with both programs involved with ongoing research with Macquarie University. Her Dear Body program has been researched by the Western Sydney University, with findings presented in both Europe and the USA. Charlotte has over 25 years' experience in leading change, and for the past 10 years, she's been facilitating mindfulness retreats and programs using a coaching approach. Charlotte's work she works with many different clients across the private, public and not-for-profit sectors, including government departments, for instance, Defence, the Australian Psychological Society and the European Social Fund and the Danish Parliament and the Global Investment Forum in the USA. So we're very privileged to have Charlotte with us today. I'll give you a warm welcome. Over to you, Charlotte.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I always get bedazzled when I see all that stuff, but I suppose we all do when we see it all written in one space. And in terms of working with lots of different people, I think, you know, I probably see it as the first one I'm working on is me, and if it works on me, then I take it further, because I think that's the tough work, to be honest. That I see myself as my own research project. So what I'm going to share with you all here is very personal. It comes from personal experience, along with my, of course, my professional experience in working with lots of gorgeous humans. So let's start with coming into calm by just doing our 5 magic breaths. So make yourselves comfortable wherever you are. Allow the seat to kind of hold you. You know, take a moment to appreciate this funny invention we call a chair that actually can hold your body. So it feels quite safe and stable. So feet flat on the floor, and then close the eyes and relax the shoulders. And just start by being aware of sounds around. Then be aware of the sensations of the feet on the floor. So not thinking about the feet, but sensing what is going on with the feet. But no words, just the sensations. And then the sensations of the body in the seat. The sensations where your thigh, your butt, your back is touching the seat. And then the hands in the lap. Now come into observing the breath and just observe it from that perspective of the body is being breathed. We don't take a breath. The body is being breathed and you're just observing it. Allow your attention to gently be on the ride of the breath. And now count on the in-breath, but then count a little further on the out-breath. So you are allowing that out-breath to sink into the body. Allowing it to sink right in. And then when you're ready, gently open the eyes. So I wonder how that feels for you, what you observe. So often what we are told is that it's like a little reset from, having rushed perhaps to get here, to going, now that is all a little bit further away and now I'm here. So when we come into being aware of the body sensation, we become present. And that's part of what I'm going to be sharing, but there's so much more. So you're going to find that this is a very new take, a different take on mindfulness. It's still very based in science and research. And there's going to be surprises as we go along with this. And also at the end, I'll share with you a way to get more if you're interested. So we're going to explore global and personal anxieties and how we're coping. Do a little stress assessment, a bit on neuroscience, what mindfulness is, and I guarantee you'll be surprised in the definition. There are many definitions. I have worked with this, as I said, for a long, long time, and I think, when we do that, it's like you keep distilling, or if you're into baking, you keep kneading the bread till kind of you get to the essence of something. Finding and knowing your inner calm, anchor for calm, that is always there and always available, and then how to get started. Now, just on practical issues, I will check the chat occasionally. Otherwise, so somebody is saying that they're struggling with sound. I'll turn mine right up. Otherwise, I think Heather Jane will also check the chat in case we need to address anything. And of course,
Leanne, is that any better? Is that any better, Leanne, with the sound turned up? Say something, Charlotte, will you please?
Yep. Can you hear me? I can put this thing a little bit closer as well.
That might be better.
Is that better?
Leanne, anybody else? How's the sound, please? Something in chat?
Charlotte is quiet. Well, I'm right. Is that better? Okay.
Sound is fine. A lot of people are saying fine. Okay, I'm going to switch mine back to mute. Thank you for the feedback.
Feel free to also turn your own system up, and I'll put this lap very close. So, I think that all works. And please feel free to also put comments and questions and whatever into your into chat, of course. So. This program is the foundation of this program is what we started doing about 12 years ago, where we were endorsed by the Australian Psychological Society to roll out mindfulness for psychologists. So we had to be very science-based, and it was quite new to me, to be honest. I trained in mindfulness, but I really didn't know much about neuroscience. But I threw myself into it, and when I then realized that everything we were finding in neuroscience, and as you probably know, there's been a total explosion in that space. I mean, a friend of mine was doing a PhD in the US a couple of years ago, and they said to her, do you know that 75% of what we know about the brain we've learned in the last 3 years? So we have a revolution in this space. And so what was so amazing to find was that everything that I was seeing in the science space was matching what I knew from mindfulness, from Buddhism in effect. And from a very critical Danish brain, that is good news. It also means that we're talking truth. We're talking resonance with reality rather than an idea, a concept, or a theory. And that is what I had been on the quest to find, because I'd been doing coaching, I had been doing training, and all very goal focused and very this and this and this. And I just thought what I'm doing is not good enough. because at some point you have to undo something. You know, in Danish, we've got this saying that, you know, just pursuing a goal and thinking it'll bring you happiness is like weeing your pants, nice and warm when you do it, and then you have to clean it up. It's kind of not substantial. So I was looking for something that would be substantial. And so this thing of mindfulness is, of course, based in Buddhism. It's 2,600 years old. And there was really on a quest to find a way to reduce suffering. It's as simple as that. And suffering is not just when we're standing there with a gaping wound. It is when we are frustrated in traffic. It is when we get angry with somebody. It is when we can't let something go. It is when we feel that we can't up to expectations. It's all of that, in effect, not being at ease with the moment. What takes us away? That's what his science actually was about. What takes me away from being present? And that's what we're going to be exploring today. So whether you're coaching or whether you come into this as a layman, you know, this will be relevant because as coaches, we need to be present. Without that, we just will never be as good as we can be. So we're going to look at techniques for that. Okay? And also, as I said to you, I bring my own kind of experience this, and I know there's a lot of people in blue out there, and I just want to tell you I was a defense and a RAF spouse for 26 years, so I do know the services and the challenges and the good things that it brings. So right now, this crazy time, you know, who would have predicted this, right? I'm sure in 10 years' time, we'll be looking back at this in ways that we can't even begin to fathom at this point. We don't know the consequences. We just know we're in the midst of it right now. So many people experience navigating big emotions, such as anxiety, loneliness, fear, and many other things in that space. And some of that is very real. Some of it is about, you know, the fear of loss of income. How will I pay the bills? Some of it, I heard the other day, somebody was feeling very vulnerable because you might have to sell his third investment property for a slight loss. So some of it is also going to be a little bit of a wake-up call for us and go, hey, you know, the world isn't necessarily just formed for us, if you like, and isn't just going to be in the way we thought it was going to be. And that's also where mindfulness comes in and opens up that space of not knowing and being comfortable with not knowing. Some of us are dealing with escalating conflicts and tensions in our relationships with people perhaps that we just, you know, would see every now and then, and now we have to be with them all the time. Perhaps it's flagging up some things that were underlying, but that we've managed to keep a lid on. Some of us are feeling overstretched, straddling the practical demands of daily responsibilities. And often for many that I'm working with, their work is actually increased. I was talking to somebody the other day and he's only had one day in the last 5 weeks. And he's feeling, you know, like he just can't function anymore. Feeling drained by the suffering in the world and the uncertainty, and particularly now that COVID is going to the poorer countries and what that means. What it means also for our, of course, economy in the future. And some are also enjoying this and going, fabulous, the pressure's off and I'm just enjoying myself. And then all this complex, it's certainly a very emotionally charged time. We also don't forget that our bodies pick up stressors. We have something called neuroceptors. We're constantly tuning into the environment. And every time you've had a conversation with somebody, or you've been with somebody, or you listen to the news, your body has become aware that this is a different and challenging time. So let's see where you're at. Let's check in with where are you at. So count how many of these stressors apply to you. And you can use your fingers to count. So if you scored quite high, don't judge yourself, right? So it's often a time, you know, I was listening to an interview this morning, a podcast, and the interviewer said, how do I go through this time being joyful? And the person on the other said, well, perhaps it's joyful is, you know, not the word. Perhaps you can just, but you should certainly be grateful. And I thought, this is garbology. To put these expectations that irrespective of what's happening, we should be joyful and grateful. You may have some of these emotions in part of the mix, but many of us are also going to feel the anxiety, feel the worry. So it is also a time to get real and to honor and respect what is arising in our bodies, because the body can't lie. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we soothe that, not with thought, but to the direct source of the challenge, the body. Let's look to the brain a little bit, and some of you may be familiar with this, that we kind of have two systems. Now, we humans are designed in an amazing way. So the first 5 to 7 years, we really kind of take on everything that we experience and store it for us to be able to predict the future. So we store things in terms of, yes, get that, repeat that, and avoid that. So this is hot, you burnt yourself, don't do that again. When mom experiences sad feelings, she just ignores them and pretends she's happy. Okay, that's what we do. The Australian dream, get your own house and you'll be happy, and 2.4 children or whatever it is, and you'll be happy. Store it in, do more of that. So we store everything in this way, and that becomes the program that kind of runs our lives until we become a little bit more conscious at times. The automated program kind of runs, depending on the research, 90 to 95% of our experiences. So it's a fairly small window. Mindfulness is there to kind of open the window of awareness for us, so we become a little bit more conscious. So we call those two dimensions, so avoiding and wanting, from a brain perspective, the reptilian brain and the mammal or the limbic system. And the reptilian is that is about avoiding danger. It is rigid and compulsive. So if there's a loud noise, what happens? You jump, right? You don't go, oh my goodness, that was a loud noise, I'm going to jump now, right? Because the body comes first. It is compulsive and rigid. It's fast, right? Before conscious thought. Remember that, because that's kind of something that's really useful to know. It has to, because if you're having a nice conversation and there's a loud noise of a bus or something, you need to react to that. The body needs to react to that rather than go, I'm just going to finish the conversation. So that's how we have to work for survival. In the mammal or the limbic system is the majority of our emotional processing and that thing of moving towards what we think is going to feel good. Okay, now these are very stylized ways of understanding the brain. There are huge limitations to this, but it's a kind of a useful little model. It's Kahneman's work around the fast track and the slow track. So that's the fast track, the automated, and then we come into the system 2, which is the cortex. It is the thriving brain, whereas we can call the other one the surviving brain. And in that one, we have our senses. We have, in a way, it's our connecting brain. So our senses, our empathy, language is the way that we respond to the world out here, right? And so, of course, when it comes to leadership, it's about this, engaging this one. Otherwise, we're just making decisions based in our past, in effect. So there's an understanding this, and that is from Professor Paul Gilbert's work around the 3 emotional regulation systems. And he says that we're always in one of these systems. We're either in threat, drive, or connected, contented system. Now, they are hierarchical in that the reactive threat system easily becomes the bigger, and the drive easily becomes more commonly visited than the connected, contented system. So let's look at it from a couple of different ways. Let's say there's COVID-19. So some are going to already have a lot of stressors. They may have had trauma, they may already be pressured, and it'd be very easy for them then to just go into threat and be in threat. And in threat, we have a very narrow focus on reality. In other words, it's just me and my challenge, right? So I easily will go, this is going to ruin me, this is going to kill me, this is going to just change the world, the friggin' politicians, they're not doing the right thing. You know, we're really into that personal and then going global with the misery. It's a lot of adrenaline. It's taxing for the system, and it's full of misery. Then we have the drive system. So the drive system kind of has 2 arms to it. So it's still based in the reactive. So remember, it's based in old assumptions and beliefs about me and the world. Okay, so let's say that we have 2 different approaches. One when I think I can get to where I want to get to, and one when I'm worried. So the one about where I don't know if I'll be safe in this, it's kind of like a background noise of not feeling safe, is full of particularly cortisol, right? So you might have heard often that the Scandinavian countries are considered some of the happiest in the world. Well, the theory is that they're actually not happy. And you might go, if you go to Denmark, you're going to not look that happy to me. But what they do have is perhaps lower levels of cortisol, because you have a bit higher social welfare system. So if you lose your job, when you retire, etc., you kind of will be okay compared to in countries with a bigger gap between rich and poor. So that is one way of understanding the drive system, is that it's that background noise of I'm not safe. And COVID-19 certainly will do that to us. And that means when I'm in that, I'm very focused on me and my task. I have to keep my job. I have to make sure I do this to get back to normal. I have to do this and this and this. We're not really open to relationships from that point, other than those that help us get to where we want to get to. But that's how we sort humans, right? We might also, if we're in the other one where we think we can get to where we want to get to, we'll go, there's possibilities in this, right? But it's still in the underlying assumption that because success and more money is going to make me happy. So we're not touching with any of the underlying assumptions. When we get to the connected contented system, this is when we get a little wiser. This is when we start to be able to notice what are the expectations, what is emerging out of this. And in that space, I've got my full capacity online. I've got, in other words, my thriving brain on, and also my prefrontal cortex, which is part of that, which is an important part, which actually goes out of action when we're stressed or anxious. So in this one, I might be curious about how is this going to land for people? What is the most useful thing I can do to support our community, to support me and my loved ones? We have a bigger space to operate in, if you like, okay? Now, we relate this to leadership. If you're a leader and you're functioning in threat and drive, it's going to cost the culture, right? If you're coaching somebody and you're doing it from the drive system, there'll be a connection missing. You will be missing points because it's still very transactional in the way it's operating. How do we shift from place to place, and how do we know where we're at? What do you think? You know what system you're at based on where the body's at. You can, of course, notice thoughts as well. The most reliable source of information is the body. And I can tell you, before I started mindfulness, I had no idea how anxious I was. I just thought, no, I just need to get the next thing done and then I'm fine. I didn't realize it was anxiety. I was living in the drive state. Okay, so that delusional pattern, that's part of that, this model, if you like. Okay. So in other words, our experience is conditioned by our past, which is organized in an avoid and approach context. This is the reactive self. Now, we might have an okay life for living in the reactive self, but it's not conscious. It's not conscious. And we will never really, if we're talking about potentiality, which I don't know, but it is perhaps relevant, then we'll never burst through, because it's kind of like we're tethered. We're still living within a prison, and we might be very happy in the prison, but we still haven't kind of touched awe in a way. So we all subject also to intense negative bias. The more stress, the more we focus on problems and dangers and ourselves, and we tend to live through our reactive system. And so the task is then to shift from this reactivity, surviving brain, it's happening to me, versus conscious responsiveness, the thriving brain. I have a choice. And so I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty around mindfulness and the research. If anyone wants more information, send me an email after, and I'm happy to send you whatever information, research you like. There are literally over probably 500,000 pieces of research now. It is just an explosion. There is kind of not one angle to life that hasn't been tried, research in relation to mindfulness now. So for consistent finding, for reliable findings, you need to look at programs that go between 6 and 8 weeks minimum, and where there is a requirement for people to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is not something you can read in a book. It is a doing thing, because what we're doing is we're using our mind to change our brain to change our mind. Okay, so these figures here, the 27 to 44% percentage change, is what we found in our 8-week programs, and they're consistent with all good mindfulness programs. And I'm just going to take one thing out: focus and attention. So imagine what difference it would make in your life if your ability to manage your attention was increased by about 35%. Think about that. So a third of the time, you'll be able to get off what you're thinking of and switch it onto something else. You'll be able to, when you're caught in misery, you'd be able to go, whoops, I think we better hop off that one. And you'll be able to switch it off to something and maintain it there. How would that be? It would dial down your misery, right? It will also make you much more able to focus and sustain focus on something that it might be good for you or something that you'd like to pursue. You might also not in conversations be able to just go, I notice that I'm getting a little anxious about this or triggered, but I'm just going to focus and stay on this. So it is the first thing we start to look at. It doesn't mean that we want to live focused all the time. No, because we need our default, but we want to be able to switch between the two, have a very narrow lens and being able to also have a wide lens, right? The wide lens is the default system, and that's when actually the learning is consolidated. So we need both. Okay, but you can see all the beautiful things, and I could go into every one of them in terms of the impact that it has on people's lives. At the end of one corporate program, one woman said, do you know, this has changed me in many ways. You may have noticed that this movement that I've had since I was 7, I no longer have. I never realized it was anxiety. And she said, and also the other day I went into work and I was the only one of my team of 5. And normally I would get really anxious about that, but I just knew I needed to keep my full capacity online. So I did the longer out breath and in breath. I kept focused. I wrote a list of what I had to do. And then I just did it. And when I got a little anxious, I went, no, just come back to that. And then she said, and I left, hadn't done anything, hadn't done everything that could be done, but I had done everything that I could do in that day. So I left knowing I had done a good day's work. And that is really satisfying. So why does it work? It only works because of neuroplasticity. And some of you are going to know about neuroplasticity. I'd like to share this lovely little story about neuroplasticity. But first, do you think you're going to be faster doing this the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and 10th time? Yes, you are. And why are you? Because, of course, you would have created a neurological pathway for it. And once you've got one little pathway, then it's like a path through the forest. Every time you walk on it, it becomes a little easier and faster to run down. And the brain uses a lot of energy, about 25% of the body's energy. It likes to go on well-worn tracks, if you like, right? So it's going to go on these very trained paths. And this little maze is just one example of it. So the story is about an 89-year-old woman. Her son was out in the US, from the US a couple of years ago, and he was sharing the story about his mother, who was 89, and that he described her as a typical Jewish mother, always whinging and complaining. His words, not mine. And he said to her while he was there, you know that this gratitude, Mom, I'm writing about this, and I'm absolutely amazed at how it's good for everything. Do you know it's good for your memory? It's good for your health. It's good for your relationships. It's good for your career, if you like. It's good for everything. And she said, it's just a shame it's too late for me, isn't it? And he said, well, what if it wasn't? Would you give it a go? And she said, all right, I would. You tell me what to do and I'll do it. So he said, what we're going to do is every time you whinge and complain, I'm going to say, and then you have to say, and I have a blessed life. We have never laughed more than that week, he said, because all I could do was go, and all she could do was go, and have a blessed life, and have a blessed life, and have a blessed life, and have a blessed life. He left after a week. The neighbor took over. 5 weeks later, his sister rings and says, what have you done to Mum? She's changing. So after 5 weeks. And then 2.5 years later, she's ill and she's lying in hospital and she's dying. And he goes to see her. And she's looking very peaceful, so he just sits there looking at her. And when she comes to, he says, I'm wondering what you were thinking, Mum. You looked so peaceful. And she says, nothing, darling. Only the occasional blessed, blessed, blessed. And that is neuroplasticity in action. So she had in effect spent 89 years training her brain for misery. And then after only a couple of months, it started to swing in the other direction. So the forming of your brain goes where your attention flows. Now go back to the previous slide and think, if you can't manage your attention through perhaps far too much social media, too much multitasking, then how's your brain being formed? Not as an informed way, not in an informed way, right? But rather willy-nilly. So mindfulness is the way of coming into the conscious forming, or at least contributing to the conscious forming of our brains. And so here is the first little exercise that we're going to do, which is about attention training. So this is what we're doing to strengthen this attention muscle. And it's very, very simple. You can't do it wrong, right? So mindfulness training is a form of meditation, but it is never about suggesting something, imagining something. Mindfulness is always being with what is, okay? And that's also what we're doing now. So the first thing is the attitude, and that attitude is about decoupling from our subconscious, from the reactive. Then we come into the body and the breath. Now take your arm and just pinch yourself under the arm here, and pinch so that it hurts. And now be aware if you can shift the attention to the fingers that are pinching. And you may be, but it's probably a little bit difficult, particularly if you're pinching hard, right? So two things in this. We're noticing the sensation, whether it be in the fingers on the arm. The sensation is what matters. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about thinking about the body. We're talking about sensations and just being aware of those. Incidentally, if you're prone to panic attacks, a little pinch like that is a really powerful way to interrupt the escalation. Okay. Attention in the body brings you into the present. And then we're noticing the breath, and just notice the breath wherever it is most noticeable to you, okay? And then we're going to do the counting. So we notice an in-breath, we notice an out-breath, and you're going to place the number. We're going to just start at 10 at the end of that out-breath. And then breathing in, breathing out, and then 9 at the end of that next one. All the way down to 0 and back up to 10. So in total, we'll share 20 breaths. Now comes the particular mind training thing is, when you notice that the mind is wandering, distracted, perhaps thinking, oh, we're out of milk, I better remember to get some, then your task is to bring that attention back to the breath and the counting. And if your little head was if in an fMRI machine, we'd then see your prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex kind of light up. Okay? Because that's what you're training. They're the two elements that are necessary for noticing that you're strayed and then to bring the attention back. Okay, so make yourself comfortable again. Close the eyes, relax the shoulders, and then be aware of the sounds around. Bring in the attitude of non-judging. So see, you cannot judge yourself at this. Sometimes what comes up is, I'm hopeless as this, I can't meditate. Just notice that. I'm not engaging with you, little thoughts. Acceptance, saying yes to this moment. And see if there's any resistance or obstacles to saying yes. And then curiosity, being curious around what you might observe. And then kindness and tenderness for the human experience, your human experience. We're just little humans trying to work it out. And now being aware of the feet on the floor. And the sensations of the body in the seat. And the sensations of the hands in the lap. And coming into observing the breath. And observing it from that perspective of the body's being breathed. allowing the out breath to be longer than the in breath. Allowing that out breath to drop right into the body. Now we're going to start the mind training. So you're going to start at 10, placing the 10 at the very end of the out breath. Remember then that if the mind wanders, your job is to bring it back to the breath and the counting. And go ahead in your own time, sharing 20 breaths. Now take another couple of breaths where you're really again allowing that out breath to sink deep into the body. And then shift the attention back to the hands in the lap, the body in the seat, and the feet on the floor. Now take the hands still with your eyes closed and rub them together quickly, noticing the warmth that's generated. And then place the hands over your face, feeling the warmth. And then relax the hands. And when you're ready, gently open the eyes. Wondering what you observed. It's a very busy mind. Perhaps that it felt a bit calming. Perhaps you can still feel a bit of anxiety in the system or not. Right? Remember, it's just a mind training. Right? It is what you kind of invest in. I'm just going to see what is being. How do the three regulations relate to adult development theory, Keegan, childhood minds? Let's I might just take that at the very end, that question, actually, because it's a very good question. But in effect is...
About three questions and 20 minutes left. We've just got about 3 questions so far and 20 minutes left. Yes. We'll take it at the end if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah. So just coming into defining mindfulness a little bit, because I think there's, when I first came to it, I thought, well, why is it called a thing like that I understood to be a bit like thinkfulness? And then after some time, I realized when I look back in the old kind of translations, that actually mindfulness in the old Pali scripts means memory. And being Danish, I looked at the word mind with an E at the end. The word in Danish is minde. And the word minde means memory. And so I thought, this is really interesting. In the Pali scripts, memory was recognized that memory is both body, feelings, and thoughts. In effect, it is the reactive, right? So mindfulness is a practice of being aware of our reactive self, of the early programming that is formed, remember, in an avoid and approach context. That's what it is, right? Now we do the mind training that we just did in order to increase the chances that we'll be able to catch some of this out. If we are high anxiety, we'll be in the grips of the threat. We won't catch a thing out because it'll be going so fast, right? So we need to down-regulate our systems and be clear on our attention in order to be able to access it. That's why it's kind of the first or second first, if you like, right? So it's the practice of being present to what arises as body sensations, feelings, and thoughts in relation to the environment around us, in effect, observing the reactive self. Now, here's something that I think you might just be very, very excited about. And that is that the language of this reactive self is the language spoken by the body. And I don't know what you think about that when you first heard it. When I first heard it, I was so excited. My brother's an actor, and he said to me one day, do you know that if you imagine that you put your tongue on the desk in front of you, you know what it tastes like, don't you? Or if you imagine you put your tongue on the carpet, you know what it tastes like, don't you? Why do you? Because you had it in your mouth when you were 1.5. And the body remembers. Now, if you sat and for a moment you thought about a really embarrassing moment or a complicated, painful conversation you might have had, your body is straight away going to change in relation to that. So it works both ways. But that's the language of the body. So the language of the reactive is the language of the body. That means when I'm aware of what's going on in the body, I'm more able to be aware of what's happening in my reactive self. Okay. Now we're getting closer to this thing of the anchor point that we talked about. Okay. So first of all, when we are present with the body, whether that's this or any sensation in the body or just the breath, we come into the present, because the body has no conceptualization. It doesn't have past and future. It just has now, sensation now. Okay. When I'm in that, I'm also not resisting this moment. That means actually I can't generate stress and anxiety when I'm present with sensation, because stress and anxiety needs a past and a future to arise. So that means it's an interrupter to that. Okay. The issues on the tissues, we know that our past is stored in cellular memory. Okay. That also means that's a place to release it. So I work with trauma every day in helping people release this stuff as body memory, which is what it has to be. The thinking about it comes after the unlocking as a nice conclusion. But to get to it through thinking, you may never get there, or it'll take a long time. It also makes us realize that the context of the body, the context of our experience is the body. You might say, what does that mean? Well, if you're very tired, think about it. How do you see the world? You probably see it that everything's a bit annoying. You just don't know what's most annoying, right? Or let's say you've left 10 minutes late for an appointment that's really important to you, and all of a sudden you think all the drivers on the road are really idiots. Well, actually, it's because your body is in a stress state, and then you go in threat or drive and everyone's annoying, right? Stopping you getting to where you want to get to. Well, here's another example. Let's say you love chocolate cake, and here's a big chocolate cake. In comes a piece, and you go, yum, 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 yum. In comes a second piece. You go, yeah, you'll have it because you don't know when you'll get another one. Then in comes a third piece. How are you going to see that? Right? Now think about it. The thing is the same. The object is the same piece of chocolate cake. But your relationship to it, the way you see it now, has changed. What has contributed to that change? The body state. So the body state is your primary context of experience. That means also it becomes the primary responsibility of us. You want to use that word self-care, because it's about self-responsibility and self-compassion. And self-responsibility is about taking care of the body. The body also reacts quicker than the conscious mind, than conscious thought. So it's actually 0.56 seconds faster. That means some years ago when I was in a conversation with a colleague of mine, and all of a sudden this red rod of rage went in the body, and I went, ooh, better be quiet now and just pay attention to that, I didn't actually go into a dialogue of how annoying she was, which would have been delusions because it was my trigger. Oh, that's my cat. But rather I could just soothe this sensation first, and then I could come back into the conversation without a charge. Okay. I think I just have to attend to my cat. Millie, come on. She thinks she's found a big, caught a big mouse or something. I'm just going to grab her so she doesn't interrupt. Okay. And also, when we are aware of the body, it strengthens our insula, which is also the area in the brain that's responsible for empathy. So that's quite lovely, isn't it? Okay. So the anchor for this calm is coming into being aware of what is happening in the body. And then the knowing that all we ever have to do is manage the moment. We don't have to manage the future, right? We can plan for the future, but as we've learned, all the big plans may not. You might have had overseas trip booked, you might have lots of things booked and it was all cancelled just like that. Doesn't mean we stop doing it, but it means we're a little bit in a slightly different relationship to them. So all we ever have to do is manage this moment, and then the next, and the next, and the next. And I've worked with some beautiful humans whose children have been diagnosed with cancer, and I said, this is one of the most powerful, useful things ever for them to come into. I don't have to think about how bad it's going to be. All I have to do is manage this moment. That means we are curious around our relationship to it, knowing that resistance to the moment sit in the reactive. So what is your relationship with this moment? Is it saying yes, yes, no, no, yes, as I'm okay with it? Is it saying no because I want X? Is it saying if only, when once, I just need to, I shouldn't have, it isn't fair, this is ridiculous, I wanted to go back to normal, I miss this, I miss that. We honor that arises. But then we have to breathe into going, interesting, it's just an arising from the reactive self. And so we can check in with, are there any barriers for me to say yes to this moment? And you will notice that resistance also as a body sensation. Okay, so your anchor is an exploration of what is my relationship with this moment, and the most real and honest answer to that is found within the body, because the body can't lie. Unlike this, it might go, oh, I'm so grateful, and the body's going, no, I'm scared. So then when the body is anxious, your first thing is to soothe it, right? And you can do that just by placing your hand over the heart and just reassuring the body, dear body, we're safe. In this moment, we're safe and all is well. Providing you are. Of course, if you're in an abuse situation, that's not appropriate, right? But most of us, most of the time, are actually safe in this moment. You might even have food in the fridge, right? And so what I suggest for getting started is do an electronic-free first hour. Don't get into social media or news or anything for the first hour. Allow yourself to come into your life rather than all the other stuff that's going on. Stick to a good routine in this time. Make sure you get enough sleep. Make sure you eat well and at the set times. Make sure you move. Do your mindfulness practice. I would just suggest that that's the most powerful way to really kind of propel, if you like, enlightenment and awakening. Structure your life and take breaks. Start doing something you love. And engage with our mindful mini moments. They are very tightly guided little meditations, 2 to 4 minutes when you're feeling that overwhelm, because the more you are on that, remember it's the reverse of our 89-year-old, the more you're feeding the neural pathways that you do not want to feed. And if you're inspired by this, if you think, you know what, I freaking want to take more on this, then I would really highly recommend my online program. I've put everything in that I've learned from myself, and I can tell you, right now I'm in the middle of a separation. I'm in the middle of this COVID thing. I have no work, no income, and yet I'm okay. So it works. It works. And I could tell you many more stories, but I won't bore you with that. But I can just tell you that this works, because what it does is that it does allow us not to bring drama onto our situation. Okay, and this program is a step-by-step method way of coming into that, right? So you can, if you're interested, you can contact me, and I'll link. You also get a follow-up email, I think, about this. Let's go to some of the questions.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Yes, we've got 2 or 3 here. We've got a couple of very interesting ones here from Adam, if I can go there first. How do the 3 regulation systems relate to adult development theory? Keegan's childhood mind, self-sovereign, socialized, self-authored, self-transforming.
I don't really understand all of it, so I'll just start with one adult theory, and that is that irrespective of where we're at, we can be more dominated by the threat, the drive, or the connected contented. That's the first point, right? If we're integrating, for instance, with transaction analysis, that many of you may know, this idea that we have a parent part in us, an adult part in us, and a child, then both the parent and the child are reactive systems. They just sit as kind of they are loaded and uploaded from our past. And the adult is what we're propelling in mindfulness. And the adult would be sitting in the connected contented. Whereas the parent and the child would could at times go into the connected contented, would tend to spend most of the time in threat and drive, so that they are over-functioning and under-functioning, if you like that terminology. And I'm not sure that fits into exactly what your framework, Adam, otherwise you have to sort of clarify that for me a little bit, please. Love the cat. I think she's beautiful, Millie. She's
yes, well handled, the cat moment, and various pets that various people have gone mad at the sound of your cat. Second question is, if the body is in the present and our mind is what enables the past future thoughts, how does the body manifest the physiological responses in advance of conscious thought? Or perhaps it's our body is responding to our unconscious thought in advance of our conscious thought.
So conscious thought comes after the body. So the body is the language of the reactive, and that means through neuroception, which is a sort of a fairly new term that has come in, which means that the body is constantly tuning in. I'm going to tell you a quick little story that illustrates this. It's a fantastic story, and it blew my mind. I'll do the brief version of it. A client had gone through the corporate program, the one that's online now, and loved the mindfulness. It changed her life. She was absolutely an ambassador for it. 2 years later, she had an assault in the workplace, and she melted. She cried nonstop for 2 weeks, and then eventually she contacted me and said, can you help put me back together? And we did a lot of the mindfulness of the body. She started to be able to go outside again. One day she went to the gym, she came back to me and she said, I had a panic attack at the gym. Why might that be? And I said, I don't have a clue. We did a little bit of gradual exposure therapy using the body techniques so she could get there again. The following time she came and she said, I went there, I was fine. I parked the car, the doors were open, I walked in, no problem. And then I had my doobie things, ear things in with music. I'm doing my thing on the treadmill. And then they fell out and I just noticed the heart rate go whoosh, and I could feel the heart pounding. So I put them back in and I just did my dear body. I just go, dear body, it's okay, it's okay. So the heart rate went down. It does it very quickly. It went down. And then she thought, what happened here? So she took them out and then she listened. And she heard the same sound of the doors at the gym as the doors at work. So this is what we talk about with neuroception, that your body is constantly tuning in. Remember, it's the reptilian brain it goes into, because this is about being alert to danger. It's constantly tuning in, am I safe? It has stored memories in a conglomerate of sounds, sights, smells, word, everything you can think of, sensations. And in that way, it's working to keep you safe. And that way, that comes first, right? It was just because of a high level of mindfulness that she was able to not lose it into, I can no longer go to the gym because I get panic attacks there. She could go to the source and soothe it, and therefore reset. But that would be another session when we talk about why is that a resetting.
Charlotte, is your program suitable for teens? Samantha is asking.
Absolutely. It's suitable for everybody. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And teams need it very much. Hello, Millie.
While you get to your lovely cat, Millie, people are asking about CCEUs, and we've had an answer from Open Door here, of course, that the Coach Week conference program, we're giving CCEUs for everything if you're attending. But I think the question might have been, it came from Judy, more about your own mindfulness programs. Are you applying for ICF CCEUs for those?
I haven't directly. I'm very happy to explore that. I know from the APS perspective, if you can justify that it's relevant to you, to your professional development, then you can get the point. So it just depends. There are just so many different organizations that where you have to kind of do a whole new process in order to be accredited. But if somebody wants to talk to me about it, I'm very happy to talk about it.
And I'm sure we can help you with that with Synergy Global as well, actually. A lot of people are saying thank you, what a fabulous session. They found it very helpful, interesting. They liked it being practical, and for sharing Millie. All people, thank you very much. The value of the session, really. So as those, okay, thank you. Some lovely thanks coming in, wonderful session, signing up now. Really interesting and everything else. On behalf of everybody at Synergy Global and the Open Door Coaching Group, Charlotte, thank you so much for a great session. And to all the participants and your questions and your comments that make it so worthwhile. We are trying to keep the program to time. We've got just a couple more minutes before you swap out for the next one. And more thanks and appreciation are coming through to you, Charlotte. So I hope your oxytocin levels are bubbling up nicely.
And I just hope to take it on. I mean, you know, even if it's just in your body, you know, when you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep and you're anxious, just put your hand over here, notice the warmth between the hand and the body, and go, dear body, because the micros in the macro and the macros in the micro. When you come in through the body, you're in sensation, and that is the portal through the thinking mind, transcending the thinking mind, and that's where we need to go.